Welcome to the Dragon Block 0S leveling guide from 0 to max. Full disclosure, at the time of recording, I'm not max level, only really boasting a level of about 95,000, but in all fairness, the grind from where I am to max level is about the same, but don't let that discourage you. The road ahead is long and perilous, but the journey is a lot of fun, so I highly recommend it. Now, before we really jump into training areas and such, there are a few baseline things I'd like to cover first. So, before we really jump into training areas and such, there are a few key things to understand, with the most important one being your stat sheet. Now, to no one's surprise, your stats will determine the strengths and weaknesses of your character, so it's best to have a general idea of what each one does and what playstyle you plan on building into. In general, it's pretty costly to redistribute your stats, and as you grow stronger, it will become more expensive to upgrade, so decisions made early on will matter pretty heavily down the line. Along with that, there are 6 different playable races, each with different scalings for each of the different stats, that allow for greater customization from the players, so it's good to review the strengths and weaknesses of those as well, before you really commit to a build. First up is the most basic and simple to understand, and that would be strength, or STR for short. This will be the essential stat for any player looking to run a melee build, as increasing the strength stat will directly increase punching damage. Next is dexterity, or dex for short. This stat will increase the player's movement speed as well as the defense. On your stat sheet, this is reflected in the active defense, which is only applied when you block by right-clicking with an empty hand, and your passive defense, which is always applied. Our next stat is Constitution, or Con for short. This stat will increase the player's health pool, as well as increasing stamina. This stamina is pretty important, as it impacts how many times you can punch without the need of some form of stamina regen, as well as how much stamina will be consumed when charging ki with the meditation skill. This stat is also one of the primary factors that will impact your ability to hold Kaioken. Next up is Willpower, or Will for short. This stat will increase your ki power, which in turn increases the damage for your ki attacks, as well as ki weapons, such as Ki Scythe and Ki Blade, which we'll be covering later. However, it will not affect the damage of the Ki Fist skill. This stat is essentially your strength stat, but for ki-based builds. Next is Mind, or MND for short. This stat does not function like the others because it won't directly affect your character. Instead, you can imagine your Mind stat as a sort of budget for how many skills you can hold at one time, and in order to hold every single skill at max level, not including transformations, you'll need 2,170 mind. It also has the added effect of increasing your flight speed, so at max mind, you'll be zipping around the map. Finally, we have Spirit, or Spee for short. This stat will affect how large your ki pool is, which will be used up for just about everything, but mostly whenever techniques like ki attacks or transformations are used. This stat can be further amplified by skills like Ki Boost and Meditation. Understanding the different stats is a good first step, but how they interact with each other is just as important, so we'll be covering that right now with ratios. When asking a player for their build, most of the time they won't give you exact numbers. Instead, they'll give you a ratio. For example, most mid-game players will run a 2-1-2 build, with the numbers following strength, dex, and constitution. What this translates to is for every 1 stat point invested in dexterity, they will invest 2 stat points in both strength and constitution. It's usually best not to let your strength stat drift too far away from your constitution stat, as you will find yourself constantly running out of stamina if your strength is too high and your constitution is too low. This issue is further exaggerated on races with especially low stamina scaling, like Full Saiyan. Another key ratio to keep track of is your spirit compared to your damage stats, strength, and will. If your spirit is too low compared to both, then you won't be able to hold any transformations very long without the help of key regeneration items. So keeping all that in mind is pretty important when making your stats. Now that we understand our base stats and ratios, let's move on to the different races you can choose from. One more thing, and then I swear we can move on to the different races. For each race, there are 3 classes: Warrior, Martial Artist, and Spiritualist. Each class offers slightly different scaling, with Warrior focusing on melee damage and defense, Spiritualist focusing on key damage and key pool, and Martial Artist, which is a hybrid of the two. Now let's move on to the different races. Let's start with the reason most of you came here, and that would be the titular race of the show, Saiyan. Now Saiyans have a plethora of transformations, and here on the server is no different. Saiyans come with 12 race-specific transformations, which is the most of any race on the server currently. They are designed as a high burst damage class, with very high melee and key damage scaling, for Warrior and Spiritualist respectively. However, they do have very low stamina scaling, so even with a 1-to-1 strength con build, you'll need a steady supply of stamina regen items in order to keep dishing out damage. Next up is Half Saiyan, or as the community lovingly calls them, Halfy. Given they are a mix of both human and Saiyan, they offer benefits from both races. Halfies benefit from high damage but not quite as high as full Saiyans, as well as good defense and better stamina scaling from its human side. They are also able to tap into the same forms as full Saiyan and offer a bit more customization and the ability to have colorful hair. They also have the added benefit of being able to sustain Kaioken a bit easier than their full Saiyan counterpart. On to our Frieza race, Arcosian, nicknamed Arcos. Now Arcos have the second most transformations behind Saiyans and Halfies, and have lots of customization options. They are relatively weak when it comes to strength and melee attack scaling, however they make up for it with extremely high will and key attack scaling. They also have great defense, with Warrior Arco having the highest defense scaling in the game, and in general, Arcos are the fastest of all the playable races. Arcos also have the special skill of power points. These power points can be built up and saved when in your minimal form at or below 50% power release, with a max of 2500 being stored at one time. Power points can allow you to boost the multiplier on transformations, but will slowly drain away as the form is used. Humans are best described as jack of all trades, master of none, boasting good stats in all categories, but not the best in any one stat. Their biggest standouts are their endurance. Humans have very good stamina and dexterity scaling, and this is further amplified by their forms having low drain and good multipliers, allowing for humans to have great sustainability. They are also very adept at using Kaioken. Namekians are built to last. They come with extremely high ki pool scaling and good stamina and health scaling, allowing them to fight for extended periods of time. They also offer good customization, as well as the giant form, which to no one's surprise allows them to grow very large, but it also has the added benefit of helping increase the area of effect on key attacks. Last but not least is the Majin race. They possess low damage, but in exchange, they have extremely high health and good defense. A true tank class, if you will. Due to their magical nature, Majins possess abilities that other races do not, such as regeneration, which allows you to regenerate health in exchange for stamina and ki. They also have absorption. Now, absorption operates similarly to power points on Arcosian, where it's able to boost the multiplier of forms through absorption points. However, the process to obtain them is a bit different. When an enemy is attacked, you have a chance to absorb them based on your attack damage and their current HP. with how many absorption points you gain based on the opponent's HP compared to your own. Absorption points will cap out at 100. One more thing on races. Each race has their own transformations that can be unlocked through superform quests or through spending training points. There are far too many forms on the server to go through, and I'd like to leave some things for you to discover for yourselves. And with every transformation comes mastery. Now, mastery functions as a way to level up forms and reward players who use them. On the server, every time you slay an enemy, you have a chance to receive mastery points for your current form. This only happens if a fight is not one-sided, so don't try to farm an enemy who has 1 HP. All forms have a max mastery value that you can reach, and as you reach that value, the form will drain less ki and have a stronger multiplier, so it's definitely worth it to level these forms. Along with that, unlocking higher forms usually requires mastery of the previous ones, so once you get a form, start mastering it. For all the people thinking about using a ki-based build, this section is for you, as we'll be going through the 9 different types of ki attacks. I'll also preface that there are a lot of nuances and conditions with ki attacks that can overcomplicate things a bit. However, when optimized correctly, they can prove more effective than melee-based builds. But that may be a bit too much for this guide, so I won't get into all of that. When it comes to ki attacks, there are a few things to note. 1. Ki attacks should always be made with 100% of your power. 2. Adding the effect or explosion is usually not worth it since it doubles the ki cost for an attack. And 3. Ki attacks can be leveled and upgraded 10 times for many aspects like density, size, and speed. But more often than not, it's best to put 5 upgrades into damage and 5 into cast time speed. Okay, with that out of the way, we can start. Our first ki attack is Shield. This ki attack will allow you to block incoming ki attacks, and the damage of it is just how strong the barrier is before it'll break. Adding an effect to it will increase its drain, but it will gain the ability to push other players away. An example of this is Android 17's barriers. Next is Explosion. This ki attack will operate inversely to Shield, and will damage everything around the player in a decent sized area. It has good damage and moderate drain, and is preferred for dealing with large groups of enemies. The effect option on this attack is disabled, and it's similar to Vegeta's final explosion. Next up is Blast. This ki attack is your run-of-the-mill energy ball that will go forward and collide with the enemy, dealing good damage and has fairly low drain, making it the go-to attack for regular play. Adding an effect to this will give it a small explosion, allowing for multiple enemies to be hit at once. It's most similar to Vegeta's Big Bang attack. Next is our Large Blast. Large Blast has undergone some recent changes, including a lower cooldown and cast time, that have made it very good for clearing large groups of enemies. Running an effect on it is just about mandatory, as it allows for it to hit more than one enemy at a time. This attack is most similar to Goku's Super Spirit Bomb or Frieza's Supernova. Next is Laser. This ki attack is a fast-moving and potentially piercing projectile that does moderate damage and has moderate drain, along with a fast charge up and low cooldown. Putting an effect on it does negate the piercing effect somewhat. It's most similar to Frieza's Death Beam. Our next attack is Wave. This ki attack is fairly average in all categories, but where it pulls ahead is its ability to hit multiple times and locking opponents in place, making it very good for boss fights. In order to do this, you must continue to look in the same direction the move was casted in, as well as not move. Also, subsequent hits will drain ki from the user. Effects will cause the multi-hit effect to act a bit odd and are not recommended. It's most similar to Master Roshi's Kamehameha. Next is the disc. This key attack operates very similar to lasers and blasts, with moderate damage and drain, but it comes with the ability to cut off tails of both Arcosians and Saiyans. Effects give it a slight area of effect, but are not recommended. It's most similar to Krillin's Destructo disc. Next is Spiral. This attack is guaranteed to pierce through enemies, however, it does lose damage the more enemies pierced. It has high damage and high drain. Adding an effect will cause the pierce to act odd, so it's not recommended. It's most similar to Piccolo's special beam cannon. Finally, we have Barrage. Currently, this attack is disabled due to a bug, but they operate as a low damage but low drain rapid fire attack, allowing for consistent damage on an enemy. It's most similar to Vegeta's consecutive Ki Blasts or Gotenks' Die Missile Barrage. We're almost through the basic stuff, there's just a bit more info I want to give you first. First up is auto clickers. Now, auto clickers are allowed on the server and are very much encouraged to save yourself from hand pain. You can find a number of auto clickers online or macros that other players have used in our Discord. Next up is Senzu beans, or most commonly called beans. These will be your main source of stamina, ki, and health regen. On right click, they will fully regenerate your stats, and then they will go into a cooldown period of about 5 seconds. Since beans are so important, there are lots of ways to obtain them, with better sources and more options opening up as you work your way through the server. When starting out, you'll be able to get 5 beans every 20 minutes from Korin at Warp Kami below the lookout. You'll also be able to get 15 beans every real life day from the Supreme Kai of logins and spawn. You can also buy the ingredients for beans and craft them in the carpentry bench at Warp Shop, or just buying sap and crafting it the same way. The recipe to craft beans from sap is a bit easier, but the trade-off is that sap is more expensive. Given buying beans will be something you're doing pretty regularly, you'll need a way to make money, and the best way to do that is with another warp farm in your base, and harvesting it with a fortune enchanted stick. You can get netherwort at /warp shop, and get an enchanted stick at /warp enchants. On the server, you'll find several different types of quests, with the first one being repeatable quests. These are your basic grinding quests that you can farm with no restrictions. Next is MC Daily, which once completed have a cooldown of about 20 minutes. After that is MC Weekly, which have a cooldown of 1 Minecraft week, or 2 hours and 20 minutes. Next we have IRL Daily, which have a cooldown of 24 hours. And finally, there's IRL Weekly, which have cooldowns of 1 full real-life week. Although the quests with long cooldowns may seem daunting, they more than make up for it with extremely high-end training point rewards. Okay, now that we're through all that, we can move on to training areas. There will be spoilers for content, but I'll try to keep those to a minimum. The first thing you should do is complete the tutorial. This involves selecting your race, learning the basic rules on the server, and claiming your rank, so that you have the ability to use warps and all that. Next up we have our first split. Most players recommend asking players on the server for a sharpness 500 stick. This will allow you to get a solid jump on quests. If not, you can do warp planes and do the quest there until you'll deal about 20 damage per hit, and then you could head over to Warp Farm. Make sure to complete all the quests there. Once you're around 80 damage per hit, you can head over to Warp Rocky and start accepting quests from Piccolo. Make sure to work your way up the different enemy types he has there to maximize TP gains. Also, Yajirobe is here, and he can heal you fully for free. While you're here, remember to start picking up some skills. Picking up Key Sense and having level 1 is good so you can lock on. Next up, I recommend Fly and Potential Unlock, and Meditation, as these will allow you to better self-sustain. Once you've cleared the Piccolo spar, go ahead and go to Warp Gohan and progress as far as you can into the saga. You should be able to clear it, but if you need some extra training, you can head to Warp Roshi and do some quests there, as most of them are IRL daily, so they offer some pretty good TP as a reward. Once you reach level 50, you'll be able to complete your first Superform quests and unlock a transformation. You can do that by going to Warp Superforms. While you're at it, you can also go to Warp Namek as it offers some pretty decent daily quests. Once you've finished Gohan's saga, you should be strong enough to handle the HTC, so head over to Warp Kami and head inside the Time Chamber. You'll be here for a good amount of time, so get comfortable, and remember to move up tiers as you get stronger, along with grabbing boss quests from Oswald. You can use the robot outside the door to teleport back in after 20 minutes. Once you've reached tier 4, make sure to do it at least once along with the boss, but you should be strong enough to head over to GP, so do Warp Jocko and start your training as a Galactic Patrol Officer. Once you've unlocked your F tier license, you can start working on getting promoted by completing all quests of that tier, including the boss and the off-world patrol missions and the grindable missions, but we're mostly here for the latter. F tier grindables will give more TP and have less health than tier 4 in the HTC, so farm that up for a good bit. When those become easy, you can head over to Warp Kata and start working your way up the ranks. Once you've cleared all the students, you can take on Master Tien, but he's a bit tough, so be careful. When Tien's taken down, you should be ready to head over to Warp Arale, which will have a lot of great grindable quests that you'll continue to come back and forth to. For now, you should be able to clear the intro quests and start farming the worms, and move on to the books shortly after. Keep working your way through the different grinding zones in Arale, and while you're at it, you should start the Underground Saga and complete every single quest at least once, with the final one being the dungeon. Once you defeat the final boss, you'll be able to do Angel Saga, which follows the same rules of clearing all the quests at least once and doing a dungeon. On your way through clearing Angel Saga, you'll be able to complete a key quest on King Kai's planet, called Havoc in Hell. It's unlocked by progressing through all the other quests on King Kai's planet, except the Kaioken Goku Rush. That quest is a bit difficult. Once you've cleared Havoc in Hell and cleared Angel Saga, you can go ahead and talk to Elder Kai on King Kai's planet to battle Sleepy Beerus. Once that's done, you can start the Battle of Gods Super Saga, which shouldn't be too bad and rewards a healthy chunk of training points. This also unlocks Beerus' planet, which has great MC daily quests and will be a key area for later. At this point, you can attempt to do Majin or Legendary quests that will give a multiplier on top of your forms, but it's a bit tough. Now that you've cleared all of that, you'll be able to train in the Deep HTC, which can be accessed by speaking to Popo in the normal HTC. You should keep progressing through your levels with Jacko at GP as well though. Once you're strong enough, you should try to complete Queen Saga, which is the final part of the Underground Trilogy. Upon defeating the Nameless Warrior and completing all the quests you've unlocked on Beer's planet so far, you can challenge Whis to a spar. Upon completing this, you'll gain access to the Resurrection F Super Saga, which will give you another good chunk of TP. Make sure to keep progressing through Arale Saga, as those grinding areas are quite valuable, as well as continuing to progress through GP with Jacko, as those quests unlock some pretty good stuff later on. Continue to unlock spars with Whis by doing all of the content you have unlocked on BP. Once you clear Spar 2 and complete the final boss of Queen Saga, you'll be able to challenge Whis to a spar for a third time. Upon completing this, you'll gain access to God Quest, which is another key quest on your journey. After doing GQ, you'll unlock a lot of things, but firstly, we should get through Universe 6 V7 Saga. To do this, go to Warp CC and in the top floor, complete all of your simulations. Then go to Warp End and battle Elder Steve. After you've defeated him, you'll be able to start 6v7. After that, work on completing End Saga, although keep in mind the final bosses are a bit tough. At the same time, you should be around B tier in Galactic Patrol, and upon completing the B tier bounty, you'll be able to speak to Agent Nitrom at GP in order to start Planet Yardrat, which gives good training areas and special abilities. At this point, you can either grind Man-Enders after completing End Saga, or one of the later Arale Saga grindables, whichever one fits your preference. I hadn't mentioned it before because the lower levels don't require it as much, but you can fuse with other players on the server. Fusion offers the benefit of doubling the stats of the weaker player that participates in the fusion, so if you being 10,000 fuse with a player that is 100,000, the fusion will have a level of 20,000 since you have the lower level. Unlocking fusion should be easy for you at this point, and all you have to do is go to Warp CC and speak to this NPC here downstairs. From there, you'll have to go through and clear each of the different enemies, working your way all the way up to the Headmaster. He's a bit weaker than Spar 3, so you should be fine. Upon defeating him, you'll unlock Fusion level 10, which has a 95% success rate, and to perform a fusion, make sure both players have it enabled in their menu, and hold the transformation button while looking at your fusion partner, as they charge their ki. Upon completing Fusion Labs, you can also speak to Goku on BP, and have him fuse with Vegeta to fight Vegito. This quest is IRL weekly, but it does give Portara earrings that when used, guarantee a successful fusion for an extended time. Now that you've completed End Saga and 6v7 Saga, you should be able to fight Unknown, who you can find here at Warp Kami. You'll also be able to battle Spar 4 with relative ease. You should keep working through Planet Yardrat as well, and going back and doing boss fights that may have been a little bit too tough for you before, like the Kaioken Goku boss rush. At this point you can start the next Super Saga, which is Future Trunks. The final fight of Act 3 on Planet Yardrat is a good indicator of if you'll be able to finish up Future Trunks Saga, so keep working on that. While working on both, you should become strong enough to defeat Spar 5 as well, which is unlocked after Act 1 of Future Trunks and Act 1 of Planet Yardrat. Once you finish up both Planet Yardrat and Future Trunks Saga, you should be able to clear Spar 6. After Spar 6, you'll be able to fully unlock Staff all the way up to its gold tier. To start doing this, you'll need to ask Whis about a new training method. Since you've already completed Universe 6v7 Saga, it'll be upgraded to Silver tier as well, which allows you to enter Staff once per day. Continue to grind on either Planet Yardrat or End Saga, as well as remembering to hit all of your daily and weekly quests for large boosts in TP. Super Simulations have TP dense daily and weekly quests that you'll unlock after finishing up each Super Saga, so don't forget about them. You'll also unlock spars with Goku and Vegeta on both Beerus Planet and Planet Yardrat that offer some great TP as well. Eventually, you'll become strong enough to clear the S tier bounty of Galactic Patrol and clear the different factions on Planet Yardrat. The Yardrat quests are tough, and some of them can be done with a team as well as fusing to beat the really tough ones. You'll also be able to complete a good chunk of the content in the Time Nest, which can be reached by speaking to the Supreme Kai of Logins in Spawn and asking to go to the event hub. Now may be a good time to speak about the rifts. On your journey, you may have noticed a few rifts here and there in some of the training zones. Maybe you even entered a few, only to find horrifying monsters inside. These rifts are part of a saga that at the time of recording is still ongoing, called the Demigras Saga. The rifts are located all around the server, and the Rift Radar NPC in the Time Nest can point you in the right direction. Along with that, there are spars located in the Time Nest that give good TP, but some can prove very challenging. Once you've completed the spar with Cronoa and Spar 6, you'll gain access to Gold Staff, which has a cooldown of MC weekly. Once you've cleared the S tier Maris sparring in Galactic Patrol, as well as the Rift within Wii Staff, you'll gain access to Tier 5 Wii Staff, which offers the best TP rewards. This is the long haul. At this stage, there are very few bosses who offer some challenge, and the best ways to grind are a handful of locations. Most players will farm gold Wii Staff with dailies and weeklies when available. If you'd like to grind further, the best area would be Ultra Man-Enders, which is unlocked through a grueling fetch quest. That's not for the faint of heart. Besides that, you can continue to grind on Planet Yardrat or in the Deep HTC, or high-end Arale areas, but this grind can be taken much slower than the rest. At this point, the bosses you'll be targeting will be the Vegito Kaioken Boss Rush and Legendary Super Saiyan 3 Broly, along with a few others, but those can all be challenged in due time. The most important thing to do at this stage is to take your time, as burnout is very frequent among players at this stage. There are many things to do along your journey that don't inherently have a level attached to it, so I've saved them for this section. First thing would be unlocking all skills and upgrading them to the max. Skills like Endurance and Ki Protection offer a nice bit of defensive help, while skills like Ki Boost and Ki Infuse are very good for upping your Ki pool and allowing you to overcharge Ki attacks. Having both also allows you to use Ki weapons like Ki Scythe and Ki Blade. Defense penetration only works in PvP, so I wouldn't really recommend it, and as for the rest of the skills like Dash and Jump, they're mostly just for fun. Next is unlocking Mystic. Now Mystic is in a bit of limbo, where it offers no drain, making the form seem very appealing, but its strength is very low compared to other forms, so it's not recommended. The quest is also very straightforward, so it doesn't need much of a guide. You can unlock it by speaking to Elder Kai above Yema. Next is Daikon. Now Daikon is also in a bit of limbo since it's planned to have a rework, but its fights do offer some good TP, as well as a decent way to get beans. The quest here is also pretty straightforward, so it shouldn't be too bad to unlock. Next is DBC Armor. DBC Armor is a newer system added to the server that offers armor that can provide you with extra stats. These can be offered from events on the server, but there are also several sources that are always available. These include armors from Underground, Galactic Patrol, End Saga, Wii Staff, and the Time Nest. Just about going hand in hand with armors, there are weapons that can be crafted from materials in different areas on the server, with the majority of them coming from Galactic Patrol, Yardrat, and End Saga. Some of these weapons do have a fairly grueling grind, but unlocking the earlier ones aren't bad, and having multiple weapons can be a good thing. Multi-wielding is a crucial part of the server, and is when a player runs an auto-clicker and quickly cycles through different weapons in their hotbar in order to attack faster. There's macros for this in the server Discord that you can find, and the debate on how many weapons is optimal has gone on for a while. In my opinion, I think 3 weapons works fine. Finally is Super Kaioken, or SK for short. SK has become more relevant than ever thanks to a recent update and has been utilized a lot in order to clear bosses much faster than intended. SK is risky because it requires a good ratio of constitution to strength, dex, and willpower in order to even hold. With that, SK further exaggerates the health drain of normal Kaioken, so using this requires a good supply of beans and good timing with your HP. Kaioken will take a percentage off your health roughly every 5 seconds, so as long as you can hold Kaioken with a form for 2 ticks, you can technically hold it indefinitely, until strain kicks in. However, 3 ticks is recommended. The reason why SK is so popular is that it can directly multiply the power of a form, and it stacks additively with the legendary or Majin buff. I'll explain what I mean. If your form has a multiplier of 10, and you're using that form with Kaioken times 20, which has a multiplier of 2.0, then we can multiply both of those together and get a final form multiplier of 20. Now, if we add legendary with a multiplier of 1.15 to this equation, it will not multiply as 10 times 2 times 1.15. It will instead add with the Kaioken multiplier first, then together they will multiply with the form multiplier. So, if you have Kaioken times 20, which has a multiplier of 2, plus only the decimal portion of the legendary multiplier, which is 0.15, we can add those together to get a final multiplier of 2.15. We then multiply that number by our original form multiplier of 10, and we're left with a final multiplier of 21.5 times. Stacking power points and absorption points works the same way, just add them to the Kaioken multi first, then multiply to your form. Okay, and with that, you should have everything you need to make your way through the server. Now, there are a few things that I might have left out or didn't cover, as they don't feel necessary, and I think it'd be fun for you to go out and find that for yourself. Any information that you'd like to read up a bit more on can be found in our server Discord along with the Trello page. I wish you all the best of luck on your path to power, and I'll see you all on the server. Oh, and don't forget, visit Warp Free TP for a small chunk of TP to kick off your playthrough with.